Ooga booga, I'm a Fatalis, roar!
Candy, stop it!
Look at me, Fatalis, it's me, I'm him, Fatalis!
Candy, no, if you say his name 4 times, then you'll summon him and then—
Oh, come on, Cotton, Fatalis doesn't exist.
Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages running for their lives, welcome one and all to your one-stop shop for everything to do with combating the dastardly dragon himself, Fatalis. Finally, we have a monster who, okay, yeah, alright, I'll say it, feels like a god. Yes, the god of all monsters himself finally has a fight that fits his name appropriately, becoming arguably one of the most difficult fights that has ever existed in a Monster Hunter game, and not for any sort of weird game mechanic-y reason like Elatrion and his Eschaton Judgment, but for reasons that feel entirely natural to Monster Hunter. Things like having wide, arcing attacks that happen quickly, having a massive range which he can attack from, and having just such a wide variety of attacks in general that he can choose the perfect one at any given moment to destroy your will to live depending on your situation.
I'm gonna fuck you up real bad.
Though yes, I know his health pool and quest timer are quite the insane thing in themselves, with him having a ridiculous amount of health to get through in a 30-minute timer. So that said, yes, this quest right here is difficult. It is hard as hell. It feels like fighting a god, and well, sometimes you might need a little help with delivering this kind of holy vengeance. So today I present to you all of our full Fatalis guide, focusing on the individually important attacks, the overarching mechanics of the fight, some general strategy ideas to take into consideration, and some little tips as well. Starting off then with the bigger, grander mechanics, this fight is divided into 3 real phases, based around the uses of his supernova. Yes, he has a supernova, but for now just know that this is the moment that he switches his phases.
Change places!
In his first phase, he is grounded and won't fly. He has limited attacks, and the arena around you will be relatively small, with a large barricade blocking the way to the rest of the arena. After you have chewed through 25% of the monster's health, leaving him at 75% remaining health, he will do his first Flame Breath Supernova, and this will transfer you into Phase 2, melting down the giant barricade in the middle of the arena and unlocking the entire area for you to use. Once in this phase, he unlocks the ability to fly, and while in the air, he will spam different fiery breath attacks until he chooses to land. He won't always fly, but this is now a part of his moveset that he can just do. At 50% health remaining, Fatalis will do his second Supernova, pushing the fight into Phase 3. This unlocks his Super Fire mode, and this is when the fight gets particularly chaotic. If neither of his horns have been broken, he will now start to spew a sort of blue-purple fire that will just absolutely rail you. However, if you have broken one of his horns, his fire will remain relatively similar to the first portion of the fight, and if you break a second one, it will become even weaker. So head damage is very important in this fight if you want to survive. At this point, the Supernovas get a bit more freestyle to dodge and occur at 40% health, 25% health, and 5% health respectively. As for how to deal with each individual Nova, I will cover that in the move section itself. There is a large amount of powerful siege weaponry in the area,
Impressive.
including 2 cannons that you have access to at the beginning of the quest, a roaming ballista, and a 3rd cannon that you gain access to in the second phase of the fight, and then the Dragonator, which activates somewhere around 8 minutes after you enter the 3rd phase of the fight. The cannons all come preloaded with 2 cannonballs and have a bucket of 5 more next to them, for a total of 7 total possible cannonballs per cannon. The roaming ballista can be used twice through the hunt, and the Dragonator will only be able to activate once, so make sure that you use it quite wisely. The most effective uses for each of these are as follows. Start the quest by putting on your ghillie mantle, dropping into the arena, filling up the 2 cannons on this first platform, and then unloading both of them into the monster's face in his default standing position, which should result in a knockdown, which you can use to tenderize and attack the head before setting up your first flint shot as he stands up. The roaming ballista is best used when he is flying, as your damage output is otherwise quite limited during this time. The 3rd cannon is great when your ghillie mantle comes back off of cooldown, and then the Dragonator you should of course just use whenever it's there, whenever it's active. After all, you wouldn't want to lose it and have to ask that question. And after you fire the Dragonator, the classic original version of Proof of a Hero starts playing in the background to kick off the finale of your quest, which just creates this feeling of intensity that I love. For all of these things that I've just mentioned, I recommend also having the heavy artillery skill in your build if you can fit it, as it significantly increases your output with these free damaging items. As for his individual moves themselves, he has quite the collection of usable options against us hunters, and as usual, there are some that are more important to be aware of than others, some that are more dangerous or are unusual to dodge in some way, shape, or form compared to the average monster. First up, I know we only had like 4 moves in the past, but they're all back, just so you know. Nostalgia is in full-on effect here, but then they just added way more on top of that, and it is worth noting that he is very learnable as well, as his moveset at any given moment depends on where you are standing, so you can sort of push him towards certain types of attacks to create openings for yourself. Starting off at long-range frontal attacks then, Fatalis' favorite move in this position is a 3 fireball combo, where he pauses for just a moment before the 3rd fireball. If you have your weapon sheathed, this isn't terrible to dodge or avoid in any way, but if you try to guard this with a shield, you are in a ton of danger, as he is liable to chain this attack over and over into itself on repeat until you just die through the chip damage, unless he has another target to attack. His next long-range attack is a frontal beam flamethrower that starts from underneath him, also coating the area under his chest with fire to start the animation, and as such this attack is also triggered at close range.
This is terrifying.
Then he also has a sweeper beam that can start from either the right or left side. The animation is an exact copy that just gets mirrored depending on which way he starts it. The attack essentially covers a 180-degree arc in front of him, and he backs up as he is firing it. The most worrying part of this attack is actually the very start of it, as if you are directly on his right or left, it is a bit deceptive how far back he actually leans his neck to start it. At the very last moment before the damage starts, his head flicks an extra bit further back, so just be aware of this when watching his animations to dodge his attack. And also at long range, he can also start this sort of new signature ability that I really love the animation for, where he squats down like a Tigrex going for a charge, and then just releases this crazy cone-shaped wave of fire forward that tricks your health downwards, and for the duration of the ability, and then is followed by a small aftershock, which is important to be aware of if you go to attack his head during this attack. If you are caught far in front of him when he starts his attack and you won't make it out by sprinting, you have 3 options to survive it. Chain Superman diving away from him as the animation lines up just right so you won't actually take any damage if you time it well. Stand behind one of the pillars in the arena, which specifically block his non-explosive attacks, his breath attacks, or if you have a shield, guard up in some guard ranks, you can block the hell out of this thing. Just put your shield in front of you for some pretty minor chip damage. Also then acting like these pillars for any teammate caught behind you.
Nothing can get through our shield.
It is absolutely also worth noting that if he reaches phase 3 of the fight without any of his horns broken, this specific attack will one-shot anything it even slightly grazes. So honestly, this right here is the main reason that you need to break the horns. This attack. Everything else is just more annoying and more likely to kill you if you don't, but this attack right here is a straight up cart fest if you don't break a horn. And then of course his classic slowly walking forward that counts as an attack.
I'm about to embark on a brisk walk.
All of these attacks are also things that he can do into the mid-range, but in this range he gains a few more abilities, such as some less threatening breaths, including a particularly interesting little move that takes some inspiration from Kieran's lightning lines, as Fatalis sprays some fire downwards before a latent aftershock triggers sequentially in the same direction that he swings his head beforehand. If he swings his head from left to right, then the left side of the line will start exploding first, and the right side will be the part that explodes last, and vice versa. This move is used a ton if you are in his mid-range sweet spot, but he can also use it on you when you're in close range. If Fatalis catches you on an elevated platform, he will occasionally do an elevated sweeping fire breath along the upper level, which is a really nice intelligent game design addition that makes Fatalis actually feel as smart as he is supposed to in the actual fight itself. On top of this, another mid-range ability that crosses over to close range is a sort of slow sweeping breath, not a side to side, so much as a going back and forth in a small burst in front of him in a relatively dodgeable pattern. If you are behind him, he has 2 specifically deadly tail attacks that he will try to pull off. One is just a straight up tail slam. It happens slowly but does a ton of damage. It just goes up and down, so just be careful here. And then the other is a full-on arcing tail sweep that does a ridiculous amount of damage, so honestly just being behind him is just not an ideal way to live your life.
I want you to watch your tail out there.
As you enter close range, you open yourself up to a few more physical attacks. Some slaps, some jabs, or even a full-on body flop that knocks you on your back and leaves you quite vulnerable. Aside from this, he also has a very Teostra-esque fiery meld move where he just shoots a flamethrower at the floor directly under him and causes constant burn damage to anyone caught within it. Then also, finally, a giant point-blank fireball shot right under his own head, which deals massive damage and has a great big blast radius of danger. As you progress the fight into further phases, you unlock more of his moveset as well. For example, he will gain the ability to fire said massive fireball at range later in, with it having a massive windup to warn you but still being super dangerous at longer ranges. As well, starting in phase 2, Fatalis also gains the ability to fly and access to said flying abilities, which are mostly just some sorts of fiery breaths. It is especially worth noting that none of his mid-air ranged abilities count as hitting his own body, so you can clutch claw to him all day long during this. Anytime he's flying, you can just clutch claw to him and essentially trivialize the fact that he even has attacks up there, so long as you stay aware of when he's going to do his landing animation, as that does count as an attack on you, and it will knock you out of the clutch claw, so keep an eye out for that. In this phase, he also gains a bit of a delayed giant fireball, almost like he fires a giant Basilgeuse scale onto the floor under him, which explodes a moment later, leading us to his final set of attacks he gains in phase 3.
Behold my new form.
Including two major attacks, the first of which is a 360-degree sweeping fire breath close range around his whole body. He will fire at one side of his body and then curl the breath up around the other side with his neck, effectively attacking every hunter in melee range at the exact same time. Though surprisingly, if you clutch claw to his body, you'll be safe. As much as this move attacks everything close to him, it doesn't actually hit his own shoulders, so you can definitely abuse this in the right moments. Then, finally, he unlocks what can only be described as the greatest pin attack in all of Monster Hunter, where he literally, with his molten chest, slams himself onto you, burning so hot that he melts your armor enough to stick to him, carrying you up off of the ground and then taking one hell of a bite out of you and pulling you off only to spit you back out on the floor. This thing is fantastic and, well, deadly as hell. I'd love to say I have better advice than just don't get hit by the attack, but the only other thing you can really do is just hope that your hunting partners have life powder if you're in a multiplayer hunt.
Apes together, strong.
And then, finally, it's important to note that the dragon right in front of us does in fact have a super move. It is scripted to an extent, but in a way that is actually really quite cool. Fatalis' Supernova is sort of an extended massive cone flame breath that slowly drains your health until he finishes it with a large blast strong enough to kill anyone caught within it. The first time this happens, you have to hide behind this large broken bell fallen on the battlefield in the background. Then the second time, you have to get in this barricade by the Dragonator and close the gate with the lever. Then for the three that happen afterwards, you have to run towards Fatalis, sort of diagonally towards his wings, as the attack is of course cone-shaped. And that just about covers the important individual attacks that he has. So let's move on to a few general tips and tricks. First up, the first time in the quest that Fatalis is paralyzed will be an extremely long period of downtime. Fatalis is weakest elementally to Dragon, and if you pick up Dragon Pods off of the floor and fire them at him, he will always flinch after 2 regularly fired pods, or after 1 Slayer Burst of Dragon Pods. You can use this at key moments during key attacks to save the lives of yourself or your hunting partners. Flinch-shotting Fatalis is a bit of an exact art. You must do it when he is on all fours. If he is standing on his hind legs or flying, then flinch-shotting him will merely put him down on all fours, pretty much wasting your slinger ammo. This is okay if you have a second hunter ready for the follow-up flinch shot, but realistically it is just always better to wait for him to come down on all legs before flinging him towards a wall. There are 2 one-shot binders in the arena, one near each of the static ballistas. You should save these for the third phase and use the downtime to do as much head damage as possible and catch up on any horn breaks that you may have missed.
Cut his head off!
Yeah. Generally speaking, the safest spot to stand against Fatalis is right in the nook under his hind leg, attacking inwards towards the chest, unless there is a long opening to hit him in the face. This place is the least vulnerable to his general attacks, and just about everything can be dodged from this position if you can keep yourself there. Next, I'd recommend that in the first 2 phases of the fight, you try to fight Fatalis relatively close to the area that you want to run to when he does a supernova, aka near the bell in the first phase, and and up near the Dragonator in the second phase. This way you won't melt to a super move whenever he chooses to whip it out. Past this, the Shieldspire Palico gadget is an absolute godsend on this quest if you have your Palico with you, as it just pulls his attention away for so long, especially when it winds up at the perfect range that Fatalis just chooses to fireball chain it infinitely. It's just a massive window of free damage. It's so good in this fight. Past this, I would recommend putting Part Breaker in if you are struggling to break the horns, Fortify if you are dying relatively frequently, or Divine Blessing Secret if you can find the space in your build to put on Gold Rathian 2 set, as Fatalis hits extremely hard, so every time that this triggers is essentially the equivalent of a max potion worth of healing applied to your character. And that just about covers it, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that you need to know in order to take down the god of all monsters himself, the Black Dragon Fatalis! Personally, I actually really enjoy his new fight, and while it is super hard, I think they did a great job of making it hard in a way that still feels somewhat fair. Sure, he's balanced insanely, but he's also the god of all monsters. If he wasn't a hard fight, I would be slightly concerned. Alright everyone, I've been Cotton Dinosaur, and this has been your guide to Fatalis himself. Do you like his new fight as much as I do? How excited were you upon getting your first kill? Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet. This is the brand new outro to tell you all the things that you do that we love, so let's start with something simple and say, oh, we love your eyes. When they're watching us play video games, when we make a bunch of jokes that are kinda lame, or when they gaze upon our failures as we try to kill the monsters or important news about the Kingdom Animalia. Rage, Continent, Hollow, we're all here, talking about the things you want to hear, so if you want to be the first to hear, like and subscribe and the bell and we'll cheer. Some of you are patrons even though we are all the noobs and you're the pros, there's nothing we can do to thank you. No, really, there's nothing we could possibly do. Goodbye.